morning. The Gemara Shabbat explains to us that one of the 39 melachot is korea, is to rip. Ripping apart few things that are attached together. This is the melacha of ripping. There's another melacha called mechatech. Mechatech is when you cut something into measured pieces. You measure and you cut into individual pieces. This is called mechatech. So, where do these apply on Shabbat? Very commonly, you want to rip bounty, you want to rip toilet paper on Shabbat. This would be asur because it will either be korea, even if you don't rip it on the line, it's korea, it's ripping, for the sake of tikkun, for the sake of having a piece to be able to use. Or it could be mechatech, where you cut along the perforated line. You're cutting a measured piece. Cutting a measured piece of something is another labor in the Hilchot Shabbat. However, what do you do in a situation where a person, preferably, he's supposed to have pre-cut the toilet paper before Shabbat, or he has tissues which are not attached to each other? So what do you do if you're not in a situation like this, where a person doesn't have pre-cut toilet paper, he doesn't have availability to have this, and he came to the bathroom and he already has a situation where he has no cut toilet paper? What does he do? So the Likut Yosef explains that there is a machloket about it. If you have not ripping on the line, is that considered midorait midorabanan? And he says that we can follow the poskim. It's only midorabanan when you cut korea not on the line, because in that situation it's only midorabanan considered a melacha. Why? Because the problem of being korea, usually korea from the Torah, says plenty poskim, is when you have many things glued together. When you have many things attached together, that's ripping from the Torah when you separate them. As opposed to when you only have one thing and you separate it from itself, right? The toilet paper, you're separating it from the toilet paper itself. Over there, if it's not on the line, you're going to be only doing korea midarabanan. It is only like tikkun kli. It's similar to fashioning a vessel, because now I have a piece that I could use. Since only midarabanan, the rabbis told us when it comes to kavod briot, when it comes to a person's self-dignity, when a person's going to have to go outside without taking care of himself, without cleaning himself because he was not able to clean because of toilet paper not ripped on Shabbat, over there the rabbis are lenient, and you don't have to embarrass yourself, and you don't have to take away your self-dignity. The rabbis did not impose their rabbinic restrictions in such a situation. So therefore, Likut Yosef says, better in a situation where a person's stuck, he should rip it b'shinui, he should rip it with the back of his hand, or he should rip it with his elbow, rip it with another abnormal fashion, and rip it not on the line. That way he'll be able to, there will be no isur d'Rabbanan in such a situation to rip toilet paper in such a way. But otherwise, during the day, on Shabbat, to rip bounty, or to rip toilet paper on the line, this will be for sure asur. We have a story for Shabbat. Baruch Hashem, there was a man who lived many years ago, and he had his own personal bank. He was so wealthy, he was able to use his own money to let people use it as a bank, and eventually his wealth grew and grew and grew, and he had his own personal bank. So one day it came to be that the market was dropping, and there was a lot of inflation, and people were not doing well in business. So he said the people started taking out their money. And the problem with banks is, if everybody comes to ask for their money at once, they don't always have liquid enough to give everybody back their deposits. So therefore he was nervous, he didn't know what to do. He has a lot of creditors asking for millions of dollars, he doesn't have them all in one place to give it all away. So he's scared and he's nervous that everyone's going to go and lynch him, everyone's going to go and get rid of him and say he's a thief. So therefore he was crying, he was upset, he wasn't able to function, he wasn't able to be a family man, he wasn't able to be a businessman, he was totally torn apart. He went one day in the park and he was walking and he didn't know what to do with himself, he was praying to Hashem. All of a sudden he sees an old man on the park bench, and the old man tells him, this or that, come here, why are you so upset? A Jew is not supposed to be upset. Where's your emunah? Where's your faith? He says, well, what do you know about my situation? I have a very hard situation. You can't even imagine what I'm going through. He says, don't worry, what's the problem? He says, the money problem? Don't worry, I'll take care of it. He takes out his checkbook. He says, how much you need? He says, no, what do you mean? What are you going to give me? I'm over $1 million I have to give back to people. It's a long time ago. It's a lot of money. He says, don't worry. He wrote him a check for $1 million. He says, he saw on the check, it says John D. Rockefeller. He says, my name is Mr. Rockefeller. Don't worry, my check is good. Don't worry, if you ever get stuck, use this check. He went home and he said, wow, HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved me. He sent me a shaliach. I'm going to use this just in case. He put it in his safe, and he said, in case everybody asks me for the money and they really don't give me an extension, I'll cash this check, I'll give everybody their money back. Ended up being, he prayed and he had emunah in himself, he was able to pay everybody back on his own. He never used the check. He went back to the park to go give thank you to this old man. He wanted to go find him. He found him sitting on the bench, but this time he had his aide, he had his nurse. and he says to him, Mr. Rockefeller, thank you, I want to give you back the check. And the nurse says, what are you doing, Mr. Rockefeller? He says, what do you mean? It's Mr. Rockefeller, he helped me, he gave me a check $1 million. She says, oh, you also fell for it? He says, what do you mean? He said, this guy, he's an old guy, you see this nursing home, he's from this nursing home, he's Dawini already, he tells everybody one day I'm Elvis, one day I'm Rockefeller, one day I'm this. Every day he tells everybody something else. He buys from the store, these cute checks, you can customize the name. He makes people think that he's somebody who he's not. And he said he realized that he had a fake check the entire time. But what? This is the koach, this is the power of believing in yourself. He was in such a nervous situation. His situation didn't change. A guy gave him a phony piece of paper. But because he believed in himself and he thought he was able to, he had trust in Hashem, he was able to get out of it. So, B'ezrat Hashem, we should all zocheh to bracha v'atzlacha.